Hunter x Hunter movie explanation. The story follows a man named Joseph, a hunter who lives deep in the wilderness with his wife and their daughter Renee. They survive by trapping animals, selling their furs, and eating the meat. Since this is their only source of income, Joseph is teaching Renee how to hunt and set traps, though she isn't very skilled yet. At the start, Joseph and Renee are checking their traps when they notice that an animal is missing. Renee immediately suspects a wolf, implying that this isn't the first time it has stolen from them. Meanwhile, Anne goes to town to sell the furs, but she's frustrated. Prices have dropped, and they barely earn enough to buy food. The shopkeeper suggests that rarer pelts like wolf or tiger would fetch a better price, but Anne is more concerned about their future. She stares longingly at a rental house advertisement, hinting at her dream of leaving the forest behind for a better life. Unlike Joseph, she doesn't enjoy hunting and wants their daughter to grow up in a town, go to school, and have opportunities beyond trapping. Back at home, tensions rise. During dinner, Renee mentions the wolf stealing their prey, which angers and Joseph hadn't told her about it. Frustrated, she demands that he do something before they starve. She also confronts him about their lifestyle, saying that she wants to move to town and get a job so they can build a better future. But Joseph refuses, insisting that hunting is all they know and that their way of life will continue for generations. The next morning, Joseph goes out to hunt the wolf, reluctantly taking Renee with him, and disapproves but can't stop them. Using a radio, she contacts Joseph, who reassures her that if things get dangerous, he will send Renee home. While tracking the wolf, Joseph finds fresh tracks and realizes it's close. He sends Renee back and tells her not to panic. But as she makes her way home, eerie noises fill the forest, terrifying her. At the same time, Anne, who is out fetching water, feels like someone is watching her. Joseph eventually spots the wolf and shoots at it. Renee hears the gunshot and, despite her fear, gathers the courage to move forward. When Joseph approaches the area where he fired, he finds no wolf, only a gruesome sight, a severed human hand half-eaten. As he pushes further into the woods, his worst fears are confirmed. He stumbles upon a horrifying scene, a circle of brutally dismembered female bodies. This isn't the work of a wolf. There's something far more sinister in the forest, a murderer lurking among them. After discovering the gruesome scene in the woods, Joseph is shaken to his core. He realizes his family is in grave danger, not just from the wolf, but from a far more dangerous predator, a murderer lurking in the forest. Though he is terrified, he keeps this discovery to himself, not wanting to panic Anne and Renee. That night, Joseph is restless. He can't eat or sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of how to protect his family. The next morning, Anne wakes up to find that Joseph is gone. He had told her the night before that he might be out all night tracking the wolf, but in reality, he has gone back to the site where he found the bodies, determined to hunt down the killer. Meanwhile, Anne and Renee go to the riverbank, where Renee realizes their dog is missing. As she goes to look for him, the wolf suddenly appears, staring them down. Instinctively, Anne screams at the top of her lungs, a desperate attempt to scare the beast away. Luckily, it works and the wolf flees. Without wasting time, Anne grabs Renee, and they rush home. But the dog is still missing, and Anne knows she can't leave him outside. Armed with a gun, she goes out searching and soon finds the dog dead, killed by the wolf. Heartbroken, she silently buries him. When she returns home, she lies to Renee, telling her that the dog is still missing and that they will search for him when Joseph returns. She doesn't want to scare her daughter any more than she already is. At this point, the true meaning behind the movie's title, Hunter x Hunter, becomes clear. This hunter family is caught between two hunters. One, a wild wolf, and the other, a brutal human predator. The next morning, Joseph is still missing. And Renee check their traps, only to find that another animal has been taken. Nearby, Anne discovers a ring in the snow. The sight of it makes her freeze. It must belong to one of the murdered girls. Determined to do something, Anne rushes to the police station to report the wolf attack, hoping they can trap or kill it. But the officers dismiss her concerns, saying that her area falls outside their jurisdiction. They also tell her that they can't take action against a wild animal. It's just following its instincts. In their view, the real problem is that N's family chooses to live in the wilderness. You hunt them, they hunt you, the officer says coldly. Frustrated and out of options, N returns home, stopping to buy food before heading back. Once home, she buries the dog properly and, out of desperation, kills a fawn to provide food for her and Renee. Together, they skin the deer, cook it, and eat, knowing that their supplies are running dangerously low. That night, as they sleep, a chilling scream echoes from the forest. Startled awake, N rushes outside. In the distance, she spots a man, wounded, barely able to stand, begging for help. Fearing that the wolf might still be lurking, she quickly brings him inside. Upon checking his belongings, she finds a radio. His leg is badly injured, and she does her best to stitch his wounds. When Renee sees this, she becomes uneasy. Dad always said never to trust a stranger, she reminds her mother. But N, trying to stay rational, replies, "Look at him, he's hurt. If your father were here, he would help him too." Meanwhile, back in town, a police officer notices something odd. A car parked in the same spot for 2 days. A nagging suspicion creeps over him, making him realize that something is not right. The police officer, suspicious of the abandoned car, decides to investigate. He steps out, looks around, and when he doesn't find anyone nearby, notes down the vehicle's license plate. Meanwhile, the injured man and rescued wakes up and introduces himself as Lou, and questions him, saying that very few people come to this remote forest. "What were you doing out here?" she asks. Lou claims he is a nature photographer. "I came to take pictures of the forest, but my car broke down. So, I went ahead on foot, and then something attacked me. I didn't see what it was, but I assume it was a wolf." He also confirms that the abandoned car belongs to him. Lou is in bad shape. His injuries are severe, and he needs to get to a hospital. But with the wolf still prowling, they can't risk traveling through the woods. N and Renee try to help him to the car, but Lou screams in pain, forcing them to turn back. Desperate to ensure their safety, N and Renee devise a plan. They scatter pieces of poisoned meat outside, set a simple trap, and light a fire to ward off the wolf. The police investigation takes a dark turn. Meanwhile, the police officer who had been investigating the disappearances, particularly of young women, grows more concerned. Even though his shift is nearly over, his gut tells him to check the abandoned car again. This turns out to be his biggest mistake. As he follows tracks in the snow, he suddenly steps into a trap. The sharp metal snaps around his leg. Before he can react, another trap snaps onto his hand, leaving him completely immobilized. He now realizes this wasn't a wolf's doing. It was set by a person elsewhere, and grows more anxious. It has been too long, and Joseph has still not returned. Determined to find him, she grabs a map and heads into the woods. While searching, she finds a rabbit caught in one of their traps. Although she hates doing it, she knows she must kill it for food. She does so reluctantly, feeling deeply saddened by the act. As she continues walking, her radio suddenly crackles to life. She follows the signal, and then she sees it, Joseph's dead body. The horrifying truth, and breaks down, crying bitterly. But as the shock fades, realization dawns. Joseph wasn't killed by a wolf. He was killed by Lou. Her husband must have discovered the truth. Lou was the one who murdered the missing girls. Joseph must have confronted him, and though he managed to wound Lou, he ultimately lost the fight. Lou then escaped, only for N to unknowingly take him in and tend to his injuries. Horrified, N races back home, realizing she has made an even bigger mistake. She left her daughter alone with a killer. A deadly confrontation. At the same time, another officer arrives at the scene, trying to track down her missing colleague. She hears movement and, fearing for her safety, fires a few shots into the darkness. Eventually, she locates the trapped officer and immediately calls for backup. And, on the other hand, carefully steps into her house. Her heart is pounding. She checks on Renee, who is sound asleep, unharmed. But something feels wrong. The room is eerily silent. Then she notices Lou is not in the bed. She turns just in time to realize he's hiding behind the door. As Anne steps into the room, Lou suddenly attacks her. A brutal struggle breaks out. In the chaos, a gunshot rings out from Anne's weapon. The sound jolts Renee awake, but by the time she reaches the scene, it's too late. Lou has overpowered Anne, knocking her unconscious. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the police finally arrive. They attempt to free their trapped colleague, but they are too late. He has already died. Realizing that something is very wrong, the officers push forward into the woods, following tracks that lead them closer to Anne's cabin. Back at the house, Anne regains consciousness. Lou looms over her, demanding the keys to her truck. "I'll give them to you," she says, her voice shaky but firm. "But first, tell me, where is my daughter?" Lou doesn't answer. Instead, he smirks and coldly tells her, "None of this would have happened if your husband had minded his own business. He interfered, so I had to kill him. And now, I'll do the same to you." He begins burning his belongings to destroy evidence, then turns his attention back to Anne, intending to assault her. But before he can act, she fights back with everything she has. She gags him, manages to break free, and then grabs a weapon, knocking him unconscious. A mother's worst nightmare. Desperate to find Renee, Anne stumbles into another room and freezes. Her face crumples in devastation. She lets out a heart-wrenching sob. Though we, the audience, don't see it, it's clear. Her daughter is dead. Lou, the sadistic killer, didn't spare her either. Grief turns to rage, tears streaking her face, and makes a silent vow. Lou will not walk away from this. The hunter becomes the hunted. Determined to avenge her husband and daughter, and drags Lou's unconscious body and hangs him from a rope. As he dangles helplessly, she puts on a pair of headphones and plays music, drowning out everything else. Then, in an act of pure, cold-blooded justice, she begins skinning him alive, just as they did to animals for survival. Because to Anne, Lou was no longer a man. He was a beast. A monster. Blood spills everywhere as she methodically removes his skin, including his face. His body, now flayed and grotesque, twitches in agony. His screams fade as his life slips away. By the time the police finally reach the cabin, Anne has already finished her work. She steps outside, carrying Lou's bloody skin in her hands. The officers freeze in shock. Speechless, they watch as she throws the skin at their feet. Inside, they find Lou still barely alive, but his fate is sealed. He won't last much longer. His body is mutilated beyond recognition, a terrifying sight even for hardened officers. As the chaos unfolds around her, Anne doesn't react. She simply sits down, listening to her music. But then, a memory of her family flashes through her mind. The weight of everything crashes down on her. Slowly, she removes her headphones. The film ends,